I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
All right, we have really got a special guest today, Jason Chinook. He is the North American CEO for Ducati, and it's no secret, Hannah, that I'm a pretty big Ducati fan.
Obsessed.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'm about to get my 20th Ducati.
Wow.
And I've known Jason since he worked at Lamborghini. He was the marketing director at Lamborghini. I still remember the first day that I met you at the New Jersey Motorsports Park. When you were teaching me how to drift an Aventador.
Oh, yes. Which is definitely an art in itself.
Which, I mean, so much fun. All right, let me set up the topics that we have today, because there's a lot going on in the world of automotive. Hannah, as you pointed out, we're waiting for an auction on Monday, and we're expecting a Ferrari, a GTO, to set another world record for Ferraris. Plus, I want to talk about old cars, because you have a couple yourself. It's a love affair that has its downsides.
Dysfunctional.
Yes. I also want to talk about a Rimac. You know, Jason's Ducati is a member of the Volkswagen Group, and Rimac is also very closely connected in that the founder is now running Bugatti, and I don't know the whole structure, but Rimac recently had another world record set. They've set so many that we're going to discuss. And I want to talk about the Maybach that you're driving this week. And then finally, I want to get to all the new Ducatis that Jason and everybody at the motor company is launching, talking about the new Panigales, the new Multistrada, the new Supermonos, which I'm most excited about. So we'll get to everything that Ducati's putting out. They have one still to reveal in December, and I don't think he's going to tell us what it is. But
you can tell us.
I'll give you a hint.
No one will hear.
I'll give you a hint, but I'm not going to...
Neither confirm nor deny.
Exactly.
All right, let's kick it off with the world of Ferraris, the world of auctions, the world of collector cars. Hannah, I still remember when I was in high school, having seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I became obsessed with the California Spider Cameron's dad had, and at the time, one of those fetched a world record price at the time of $14 million. What are we looking for?
$14 million probably won't crack the top. It might crack the top 15 these days. On Monday, we're looking at a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO that RM Sotheby's is saying they hope to get $60 million for. Now, I'm hearing from
$60 million?
$60 million, 60. I'm hearing from my sources, $50 million may be more realistic. But RM Sotheby's certainly is billing this car as a $60 million Ferrari. That would be the most expensive Ferrari sold publicly this year, although there has been another Ferrari sold that was closer to $50 million. It was 48. So this may not be the most expensive Ferrari sold ever publicly, but certainly for this year, it's kind of a big deal. This is a 1962 racing Ferrari. It did race in the Nürburgring in 62 and it won its class, but it's the only one of those V12 racing Ferraris that got a 4-liter engine straight from the factory. And they basically did that because they found some racing loopholes that particular year. They knew they wanted to race it and they figured we can put in this 4-liter engine and qualify for certain different races. And the car did well. It did race Le Mans and actually didn't end up finishing. But it's been owned by the same guy for almost 4 decades.
Wow.
So it sort of checks every single box. And yeah, they're thinking 50 to 60 million. We'll see. Sales on Monday.
You know who has a GTO, I think, is, what's the name of the drummer for Pink Floyd? He's got a big car collection. He's got a big collector car fund, and he has a GTO. I know because I saw Nick Mason, right?
Yeah,
I saw him go on a Spanish talk show to explain why the car is so valuable. One other cool thing that I heard today from a car collector, I was talking to Philip Richter here in New York. He runs Hollowbrook Wealth Management, but also the Turtle Invitational is his car show here in Bedford. He said that Enzo started building V12s. He loved the 12-cylinder engine because he was such a huge fan of the Packard V12s from the 1930s.
Wow. Have not heard that. That is wild.
Apparently, like Packard had, at the time, they were the luxury vehicles of the day, and they had like an amazing V12, and Enzo was obsessed with the Packard V12, and that's why he kicked off his cars with those.
Well, I mean, obsession does lead you to good places, I have to say, and whatever Enzo was obsessed with really worked out for him, because if you look at the car market, Ferraris are the standard. They are the blue chip vehicles. They hold their value. I mean, this year was actually a bit of a cooling year for collector cars. The sales in Monterey were down. We're seeing some cooling, but Ferraris in particular are really staying very solid. I can't remember if I told you this before, but 11 of the 15 top individual sales this year publicly were Ferraris. So it's kind of a sure thing. It's interesting. I know you love, your muscle cars, Matt, and I was talking to Craig Jackson yesterday, from Barrett Jackson. Yeah. And I was like, under what circumstances would we have a muscle car like a Challenger, in this really, really rarefied air? Because we have had a few over $1 million.
Kudos. Kudos, right?
Completely. Yeah, exactly. We've had some Shelby, some Shelby Cobras in the couple $1 million range. So they're not there yet. It's like Ferrari. It's almost boring at this point.
What was that like, Jason? You worked at Lamborghini. I think you were head of marketing for North America. What was it like being always compared to Ferrari?
Yeah, I mean, inevitably there's a long shadow that they cast. And so, and we're part of our story is part of Ferrari's story. It's that challenge. I loved it. I actually loved it because, there was a certain entity that they hold in a place in the luxury car world. And we made it a point that we don't need to be that. We can be something else. We can be something that more accessible, approachable, a little bit more, let's say, loose and fun and a little wild. And I think that really, you look at the founders of both of those companies, one was a little more rough around the edges and the other one was a little bit more polished. And that in itself, I think, really led to the type of clients that we attracted. And that's the one thing I loved about that time that I had there, because there's a misperception of the type of client that owns a Lamborghini. And then when you get in to really learn who these people are, they're amazing. Mm-hmm. They're self-made. They're people that are, let's say, that maybe worked their lives to death to the point where they're like, okay, I'm finally going to go do something nice for myself. And they reward themselves with this dream car that they saw in, a 70s movie. It's nice. It's actually, it's fun to have, let's call it something that challenges you instead of just riding your own path.
Do you see, Hannah, the old Lamborghinis going for anywhere close to older Ferraris?
Well, not yet, but I have to say, some of the Countachs, especially we wrote about one recently that was just sold. It was in the Wolf of Wall Street.
A white one. By the way, Doug DeMuro just bought a white Countach as well.
Which is kind of insane.
Yeah.
I think they're holding their value. They're slowly getting up there. They're certainly over $1 million in value, and I see that continuing. I mean, I don't know what you think,
crazy.
Jason, but
I remember when Matt Farah bought one, and I thought, first of all, how is Matt Farah, and by the way, no dig at him because I'm about the same size. How's he going to fit into a Countach?
Yeah. I
mean, Jason, you would have trouble fitting into an old Countach as well, right? And I heard they drive horribly, but Doug says...
Well, they are tractors. Let's not forget. I mean, they are tractors. This is a classic case, I think, of sometimes never want to meet your car heroes. And by car heroes, I mean the cars you had on the poster on your bedroom wall.
Yes.
Sometimes you don't actually want to drive them because they drive like a truck or a tractor. And that's just the truth.
Keep it a dream. Keep it a dream. Keep it that. I mean, absolutely. I can tell you that I spent some time in those cars, and they do drive like you said.
I will tell you something really cool happened to me. So famously, Ferruccio Lamborghini got into a fight with Enzo about the clutch in the Ferraris that kept breaking. And then Ferruccio found out that Enzo was using the same clutches that Lamborghini was buying for its tractors. And then he made his own car. So a couple years ago, I was in the Motor Valley. In Modena, they do this Motor Valley thing where they bring together all the car makers and they have dinners and they have a car show and stuff. And I saw Tommaso Lamborghini standing by an old 1950s Ferrari. And I walked over to him and I said, "Yo, I heard the clutches in these things suck." He found it amusing. But
I'd hope you would provoke a smile.
Yeah. So in terms of old cars, I've never been one to buy. I always wanted to have an old collector car, and I've never pulled the trigger because I thought I'm into muscle cars really, so I might as well buy a new muscle car that has the crash protection. I'm a dad, so I want safety and stuff and the drivability of it. But Hannah,
so boring.
You have succumbed and bought a couple. You have what, a C3 Corvette, and you have an old Rolls Royce, like early 70s Rolls Royce.
Yes, I've got access to quite a few more.
Isn't it like deadly expensive to get these things fixed? Certainly, the Rolls Royce must be prohibitively.
Well, look, there's that famous saying, there's nothing as expensive as a cheap Rolls Royce, by which they mean you can pick up an old Silver Shadow. I've got a Silver Shadow. You can pick up an old Silver Shadow for under $20,000. But, the costs of fixing the hydraulic brakes and, the alternator continually going on the fritz can be expensive. It can be a dysfunctional relationship. And I had a really good run driving sort of a combination of a couple different old Rolls Royces and the Corvette. And yesterday on the way to work, I did have a fail to proceed in the Rolls Royce, which was really annoying. And I think it was an alternator issue because the car ran fine, started fine. I pulled off to get coffee. And when I went back to make the rest of the way to the work, it didn't start, dead battery. So I think it's an alternator issue. It was getting like 11 volts and it should be getting like 13. But it's annoying. It's painful. I had to wait for someone to jump me and then you'd switch out battery. But all that to say, I think the world would be a better place if everybody drove old cars. It forces you to drive slower. It makes you appreciate mechanical engineering. And it just is, it's more beautiful.
Have you ever had experience with old cars or old bikes?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I went down both of those paths. And then I got to a certain point in my life where I decided I had little time to fiddle. And I just want to ride and drive. I'm an old Volkswagen guy, not just because of the company, but first car was a 71 Squareback. I love that car to death. And I still even romanticize. I mean, I'm on Bring a Trailer and all these other things to like wait to see if the perfect one pops up, which is completely insane. Like there's no reason I need that car. But if the right one shows up, baby blue, 71, then I'm there.
Yes.
And so there is a fondness, but I do feel as though that like I would have a moment of realizing I probably shouldn't have done. I probably shouldn't have met my hero. Same thing with like an old 914, which was the first car I ever went over 100 miles an hour in. And so it's burned into my brain. Wow. You lean over as a 7-year-old kid and look at the dash and you see the needle buried at 100 and you're like holding on for dear life in a 914.
That's a feat.
Scary. That's quite scary.
That's a feat.
It was rattling, but it was so exhilarating. I mean, and that immediately I knew I was hooked on speed. Like, I mean, that was where
I feel like Bring a Trailer has really revived. This is another thing that the collector I was talking to, Philip Richter, he was saying Bring a Trailer has really done a lot for the collector car market.
It's unbelievable what Randy Nonnenberg, who's the founder of Bring a Trailer, has done. They just actually released an app, finally, but last year they did like $1.3 billion in sales. It's unbelievable. And they forced every other major auction house to start selling online and to start having these online auctions that they never did before because people kind of realized, oh, I don't have to drive a car to buy it. And I think Bring a Trailer's done a really good job of being very transparent. You know what you're getting. It's so fun to read the comments. Even if you're not bidding, it's so addicting. I admit I'm on it under a different name just because I want to read the comments and, follow along on my...
You have a pseudonym on Bring a Trailer.
I do.
That's hilarious.
It's so fun. Yeah, it's unbelievable what they've done, and they forced all the other auction houses to catch up.
So I like the retro releases. Like my favorite Mustang is like a 2012 Boss 302. Obviously, I bought the Challenger, which is an homage. One of my favorite motorcycles is the Sport Classic, which, by the way, Jason, that was a motorcycle that didn't really sell for Ducati at the time. And now you can't find one for less than like 20 grand. And I'm talking about not the Paul Smart, but you can't even find a regular one with like 15,000 miles on it for less than 20 grand. Everybody wants one of those. Why don't you guys do something like that again?
I mean, simply put, that is a bike that was kind of, it was an extension of what we did with the MH900E, the Mike Halewood inspired replica. And then the idea was, wow, this was so good. We sold 2,000 of them right away in year 2000. That was the first time somebody did an online sale of a motorcycle. we're like, oh, let's extend this. And we were too early. We were too early for this trend of the classics. There's been discussion internally at Ducati about like resurrecting the concept.
After that came the R9T. After that came the Triumphs.
I mean, it created an entire trend of those motorcycles. And actually, really interesting, to your point, we actually did really well for the first couple of years of selling them. And then the third and the fourth year of the bike, it just was like, okay, we're a little long in the tooth. One thing happened. We loaned the motorcycle for the launch of for the new Tron movie. And as a result, it just created this really cool buzz.
That was awesome.
For all these people who didn't know about the bike, all of a sudden they went and saw Tron. We're like, okay, I need it. And that single-handedly drove the prices up.
I like the first one, which had the yellow and the single shock in the back, and then the Tron was the black one with no fairing. But then you had the sport version with the fairing, the red one with the. I love all those, and the Paul Smart. Those are great. All right, let's move on to another topic. I want to talk about the ultra expensive vehicles, one of which, Hannah, you're driving, and one of which, well, even on another level of expensive, is the Rimac, which has made so many records. Tell us about the weird record that you messaged me about this last night, and I told my wife I couldn't believe it.
It's kind of wild. So yesterday in Germany, Rimac set a Guinness Book of World Records for going in reverse, for top speed in reverse. Do you want to guess what the top speed was?
I thought you were going to say like 70 miles an hour.
171 miles per hour in reverse, which is it's ridiculous. It sounds so stupid and silly, but it's also kind of cool.
It sounds very unsafe to me.
I need to know more about it. I should say Rimac has plenty of speed records. They have like 20 speed records going forward. So they're obviously very legit. This is the record I guess you go for after you've already set the world record for an electric car, which they do have. And, going forward there, I think the world record's at 256 miles an hour, which is phenomenal. Doesn't beat the Bugatti Chiron, but for an electric vehicle, it's the record. But yeah, this reverse record, it's weird but cool, I'd say.
I just don't love electric cars, I have to say. I've been thinking about it so much recently because I've driven some that have impressed me, the Mercedes especially, the GLE, but most of them, like the kind of speed that you get is amazing, but it doesn't feel that great, right? I haven't driven a Rimac, but I've driven the Chiron, and it's awesome. Mm-hmm. It's like earth-shattering.
Yes. Yeah, the Rimac, honestly, I really liked it when I drove it. I think Rimac as a company is fascinating. Mate Rimac, the founder, is sort of the anti-Elon Musk. He is very young. He's Croatian. He's received millions of dollars in funding from Porsche, and also now he's leading Bugatti. He's a genius. I should say, too, this afternoon, I'm going to be driving the Battista Pininfarina, which is another electric vehicle that is powered by Rimac Automotive batteries. So Rimac actually has their hands in a lot of some of these supercars. And I actually did like how the Nevera drove. I thought it was really nimble, really elegant, obviously extremely fast. And the interior, I thought, was very well done. We're used to seeing a lot of these electric cars with very shoddy interiors that almost feel like an afterthought.
Yeah.
But the Nevera, they really pulled it off. I think Rimac is doing a lot of things right. They're a lot more conservative in running their mouths, promising things they can't deliver. And that seems to be rare among some of these electric startup companies. I'm not going to name any other names, but you can fill in the blanks. So yeah, I just think it's cool. I think Rimac is, they're having fun. I saw their team. I talked to Mate in August in Pebble Beach, and he is just very humble. He's a family man. He leads a quiet life.
Well, because I was wondering if you got him on any bikes, Jason. Have you ever given him a?
Not that I'm aware of, but I could only imagine what that could be.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, electric motorcycles.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah.
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? It's a really interesting thing. At the end of the day, people are asking us, when is Ducati building an electric motorcycle? Good news is we have. In MotoGP or Moto E, we're actually the sole supplier of the motorcycle for that series. And it's one of the things that we know that eventually we're going to have to get there. But the battery technology right now is really, really challenging for motorcycles because you don't have the same energy density as you do with an internal combustion engine. And unlike automotive, where you have the opportunity to put the weight down on the floor and floorboards, with motorcycling, where are you going to go? You're going up. And we did this analysis a couple of years ago where, let's call it our middleweight sport bike, the Panigale V2 at the time. In order for us to deliver the same sort of performance and the same sort of range for that motorcycle, it would practically double in weight. And we're talking double in weight. All of a sudden, what's an important characteristic of Ducati? It's the handling.
Yep.
And you just throw that away if you double the weight.
I also like, the acceleration. I love the braking. I like the design. I love the build quality.
Is there anything you don't love, Matt?
Jason Chinook, you are the CEO of Ducati North America. You guys have released a string of bikes, some of which I find absolutely fascinating. So let's just run through them real quick, starting with the Supermono, because that's, to me, an amazing opportunity. You can get now girls and guys out on a Ducati doing Supermoto for real. And what's the genesis of this bike? How did you come to do it after not having done a single cylinder motorcycle for so long?
Well, I mean, it's a really interesting thing because we have the history of a Supermono engine, which is basically a 749 many years ago, one of our motorcycles that we lobbed one of the cylinders off.
I keep calling it Supermono, but you have a different name for it now,
back
right?
then it was the Supermono, but we actually the model itself is it's basically the Supermono, the Super Quadromono. And the reason why is because with the over square engine, what we did is we took half of a Panigale 1299, which was the pinnacle of the V2 engines for us. And once again, we took a cylinder off. We took the horizontal cylinder off of the motorcycle and kept the vertical, and then made sure to balance it out right. And we have a motorcycle that when the engine is mounted into the chassis, it's 333 pounds, and it will be delivering almost 75 horsepower, 74.5, and with a full race exhaust system that you're only going to use for the track, of course.
Of course.
I mean, Jason, I'm curious. You said earlier that, it's inevitable that you guys will do an electric bike, but why? My question is why?
Why? Because that's part of it has to do with our requirements as a manufacturer being part of this larger group. But we're not specifically set on electric. Just to be clear, our objective here isn't to build an electric motorcycle. That's not the box that we're checking. We're checking the box of how do we reduce our carbon footprint. Simply, how do we be a responsible, sustainable company in terms of what product we're bringing to market? And electric is one of the boxes. It's one of the areas for us to look. It seems to be the one that's getting the most attention, so we have to pay attention to it.
Are people asking for it?
Absolutely
like customers?
not. No.
Yeah.
They're not. And that's actually a point that seems to be not wanting. People don't want to discuss that point.
But maybe they will after Moto E, because the Desmo Sedici was only in race form until people asked for it for so long that you had to finally put it out.
Well, and that's part of our strategy in terms of Moto E. It's if we're going to do this, we're going to do it at the highest level, and we're going to use that as an opportunity to be a real world R&D lab. I mean, that's what we're getting out of it. We're starting to set times that are actually in line with what we used to do in World Superbike, and so we're closing the gap. But what better lab to be able to experience that and find a way for it to trickle down to the final consumer? But to your point, Hannah, we're also looking at other technologies. For example, simple things that have been done in automotive for years, but it's never been applied to motorcycling, like cylinder deactivation, like the V4, the rear bank of cylinders.
Yeah.
Whether you're at low RPMs when you're riding in town, or you're at low RPMs when you're out on the open highway and you're just not cracking on the motor, the bank of rear cylinders will deactivate, and actually it's definitely good for heat transfer, for fuel reduction. So there's those sorts of things we're looking at. Also, alternative fuels, which we know MotoGP is going to be going to 100% alternative fuels in a couple of years, and so that's an area that we're looking at as well. So I think there is that area of us being a big company, let's say big in terms of our world, and trying to find a way to be responsible in actually what we're doing and bringing new product to market. And so this is something this is why E is definitely one of the solutions.
By the way, the cylinder bank deactivation, which happens on most of the multistradas, I think does not happen on the new multistrada on the RS, the V4 RS, because that goes back to the desmodromic valves, which I'm so pumped about. Hannah, I have had 3 multistradas, twins, and I was waiting to get the V4 until they put a smaller front tire on it, which they did with the Pikes Peak last year. And then I told Jason at one point, but I want Desmo hydraulic valves on it, and he was like, wait till next year.
Yeah.
And so now
so there are some perks.
Little birdie. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
now
It
it's
was
out, and I'm pretty excited about that.
And you know, of course, it's not. I'm not a sales prevention officer. I'm not going to tell somebody to not buy a motorcycle. But I also know that I will be hearing it for a long time if he went out and got the Pikes Peak, and then the RS came a couple months later. So
tell us about the new Panigale that you put out as an homage to the 916. And a lot of people will say that the 916 is one of the most beautiful motorcycles ever penned. But I think it didn't even have 100 horsepower, right? And this one's going to have basically 2.
Well, the original 916 was just bumping right above 100, just barely. Yeah, but this thing, it is perfectly put as an homage to the original 916 for a matter of recognizing its place in history for Ducati. One of the most iconic motorcycle designs ever. In fact, if you ever Google up the word superbike, usually the 916 is what comes to mind right away. And it was important for us to celebrate that because part of our heritage is actually a really important part of who we are and what we've done. And especially as we look at the current design of the motorcycle that we have today with the Panigale V4 series, I mean, the ability to find that livery and to be able to connect it with that model and then spec it out with all of the best stuff. I mean, from the carbon fiber wheels to the dry clutch but things that are actually real world. I had actually a client texting me last night as I was flying into New York, asking me, should I get it? Should I get it? I'm like, do you love it? Yes. Okay, then you get it. And that's what it inspires those people that are serious collectors to get it. And actually right now, I could say as of today, because I checked with my sales team, we've sold out of our North American production of this motorcycle, our allocation, gone in one day.
That's good for you, but depressing for those of us who haven't ordered one yet.
Sorry, Matt.
Yeah.
I'll get you on the list.
All right. So I'm very excited about all that. There's a new bike coming. There's one more new bike that you guys have to premiere in December. And I don't know what it is, but I remember one time when I met Magnus Walker, I think we were in Geneva or maybe in Frankfurt at a Lamborghini unveiling. You had put a bike out that was like unveiled at the same time as a Lamborghini, and they had kind of the same livery. And it was so cool. And that partnership makes a lot of sense to me.
So Italian.
Yeah, it's Italian. They're both
love it.
like in Bologna, basically.
Yeah.
And I just get it. But this next bike you're going to put out is a collab. And it's not with Lamborghini?
It's not with Lamborghini, and it's definitely a departure from what people would maybe normally expect. There's some collaborations where it's an obvious, right? It's a gimme. This one is a bit of a stretch for us, but it's actually, like I said, to you earlier, I've seen the bike in person. It's just beautiful, elegant, the perfect collaboration. And we're going to be hosting it at Art Basel in Miami the first week of December. So that's where we're going to unveil this motorcycle. And I think that there's a great opportunity for us to be able to reach actually a little bit of a different audience with this. And that's the one thing that as a brand, we're always trying to do. How do we stretch but stay true to who we are? And part of it is the design. And I can tell you that our design team, Andrea Ferraresi, along with the other designers from the other company, worked very closely on the details of this motorcycle to bring something to market that I think will be a bit unexpected.
You mentioned reaching an audience. This is a self-serving question because I'm going to get a Scrambler full throttle in a couple weeks to try. I have to imagine that the Scrambler is your best-selling bike. Is that true? I mean, Matt has all of his fancy, expensive, extremely powerful bikes, but honestly, I love the Scrambler.
Agreed. Totally agree.
Is that actually your best-selling model? Is that, when people think of Ducati, is that what they actually think about?
Actually, no. The Scrambler had, when it first came out, it was part of this, kind of on the tail end of this trend of postmodern heritage-influenced motorcycles. And it did very, very well for us, and consistently it does well. But it's very interesting to see that since the shift of the pandemic in the motorcycling market, we've really seen a lot of our growth in terms of our volumes and in profit going to our higher end product. And
interesting.
The Scrambler has been great because it allows access and entry to Ducati, into the entire world of Ducati, but through, let's say, something that's unintimidating and fun. I personally still have my Scrambler Desert Sled I've had for 5 years now, and I get on it and I ride it and I love it. 800cc air cooled, it's 70-something horsepower.
Fun.
It's just fun.
Easy and fun, yeah.
And that simplicity of riding it reminds me what got me into motorcycling in the first place. But then, of course, I like to get on a Multistrada V4 rally and crack the throttle triple digits on open roads. So it's great that we have that broad breadth of product that allows people to find their way into Ducati as well. So, and these current versions of the next gen Scrambler have been spectacular for us because we've been able to add a lot of the technology to the motorcycles, making them, I'd say, definitely safer, more easily accessible, more approachable, riding modes and all of this stuff, but still have that kind of classic design that's been a little bit more modernized.
I love that. It's interesting that you say really your business is showing growth in the more expensive things because that's the same exact with automakers. I mean, they are just, it's like price isn't really a consideration. If you're over a certain threshold of what the MSRP is, it doesn't really matter to the people who are, I mean, it does, but that's not going to be the prohibiting factor for them at all.
You're absolutely right. In fact, This is something that we have engineered by design in North America as well, because we see the opportunity. We see that as being a differentiator for us. And as a brand, when we do that, we actually are more profitable and we get to make investments back into the client experiences. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of great motorcycles out there, but what do people want? They want stuff to do with their motorcycles, right? Like, okay, I'm biased. Matt, you're probably a little biased about the greatest motorcycles in the world, but it doesn't mean anything unless you have something to do with it. So we have been really investing on creating experiences for these clients that go beyond just you own it and you get a look at it at the garage, which is definitely an ownership experience.
Love it.
Yes, to open the door and go, oh, yeah. But what do you actually do with it? And that is what people are looking for. That's what really matters. And that brings substance to the ownership experience.
Jason, it's been great having you here with us in the studio. Thanks so much for joining us. Jason Chinook is the CEO of Ducati North America. And we didn't get to the Maybach because Hannah is driving, I don't know which one, but a Maybach, and I wanted to get her take on it. But Hannah, at some point, you're going to write a story about it, right?
Yeah, we'll have the review in a couple weeks. It's the Mercedes Maybach GLS 600. It's their big, expensive SUV, and it is kind of fabulous. So look forward to that in a couple weeks. You can read all of my coverage on Bloomberg at Bloomberg Pursuits and follow me on Instagram at Hannah Elliott XO.
You can follow me on Instagram as well at Matt Miller 1973, and you can watch me on Bloomberg Television every day at 1 p.m. You can listen to me on Bloomberg Radio every day from 10 to 1. We're also on YouTube, and one other cool thing is that the Bloomberg Business app is now available on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is super cool because you have it in your dashboard and you can click on any of the podcasts or any of the live programs as well. Thanks very much for listening. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. I'm Matt Miller.
I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Bloomberg.